Welcome back, everybody, to Ravenstar's Witching Hour. I am your host, Solaris BlueRaven. There's an echo there, Mark. But my wonderful guest tonight is Mark Johnson. And Mark, we were touching on the reincarnation before we hit the break. You want to continue on?
Sure. As I was mentioning, the after doing this hypnotic regression, and I saw myself as this woman in the late 1800s, and I knew it was in Boston. I knew the woman's name, Marion Howe, and I did some research and found out her full name was Florence Marion Howe, and her mother turned out to be Julia Ward Howe. That name sounds familiar. She was the woman who wrote the Battle Hymn of the Republic.
Wow.
Which was the main theme song back during the Civil War and was for the abolitionist movement. And what was interesting about this is not only was it interesting to know that I had a regression and found myself in another time, but I was able to find who this person was, find out where she's buried, and that it had that whole family connection. And with the family connection, there's this picture that I found that is a collage of all the Howe children, which there were 4 girls and 1 boy. And I was working with Irene and her group at the time, Spirit Rescue International. And one of the women, Sheila, in our group, who's very psychic and sensitive, she kept picking up that Irene was a sister with me in that lifetime. And we started looking into it, and things came out where we found which one she was. And there's a striking resemblance to the girl that she was as my sister back in this time and how she looks now. In fact, there's a slight resemblance with the Marion Howe and how I looked when I was younger too. So there's a theory that people keep a slight resemblance of themselves when they reincarnate.
Mm-hmm.
But what was interesting is with her realization, there were a lot of synchronicities that came into play that just kind of blew us away. Like she was Elizabeth Howe, who would go on to become a Pulitzer Prize winning author. And Irene, of course, is an author. She's written 3 books. Nothing Pulitzer winning, of course, but she's always had this passion for writing. So there's that connection. Elizabeth was born in 1845. Irene was born in 1945. No, 1850 and 1950. She's going to kill me by adding years to her age. Towns where Elizabeth lived, the name of it, I forget the name of it off the top of my head, but it's identical to a town right near where Irene was born and raised. Wow. And there was a whole bunch of other synchronicities that kind of came out in that between the 2 of them, more than what I saw with what I had my regression. So we did a whole show on reincarnation discussing that, but it's a fascinating topic.
Yeah, well, what's really interesting is that you actually had a name, and your name was actually confirmed. So that is something that's, to me, is more credible than a lot of other things.
Yeah, and it was such an obscure name, though, that it's not like something I would have read in a book.
Right.
I've heard of Julia Ward Howe, but I knew nothing about her family or children or anything like that. So the fact that I was able to pick that information up and then look her up and actually to find her after a bit of research was amazing.
Well, let me ask you something. Do you have a connection to the old ancestors of the American Revolution? Do you have a lineage that's old normally?
I honestly don't know. I don't know a lot of my own family genealogy.
Really? Is that right? You should look into it.
My brother looked it up at one point, and but I never saw. I'm not sure. I know my family came over here from England at one point.
Okay, well, you're old then. Old family, perhaps.
Possibly.
I was just curious because sometimes we have. I talked about the cellular memory, but we can access our ancestors' memories too. So if you had an ancestor, say in the Revolutionary War or something like that, we could actually access their database if we really know what we're doing. I've been able to do that actually. This is in the old days when I was a lot younger, and I was able to get into things that I knew that wasn't me in the incarnation, but I was able to access data, and it was correct. So yeah, it's really interesting.
Well, when I was in my 20s, I had a very vivid dream, and I realized later it was a past life dream, where in this dream, I was an American soldier in World War II in Europe fighting the Germans. And in this scene that I saw, I was in a running firefight, and I got shot in the chest, and I felt it in the dream. I felt that bullet hitting me square in the chest.
Mhm.
I dropped to the ground, and I was not dead, but I was delirious and in shock. I kept feeling like I had to keep fighting. I had to keep fighting, so I grabbed a grenade to throw just anywhere. I was just trying to stay in the fight, and I pulled the pin on it. Was gonna throw it, and I got shot in the chest again,
Mm.
and I dropped it behind me, and it
Wow.
went off. And when that thing went off, everything went black, and I stopped breathing, and then I woke up because I had stopped breathing.
Mhm.
Now, I'd watched World War II movies. My dad was in World War II, in the Pacific. I'm familiar with the subject matter, but I really didn't think much about it at the time. It wasn't until several years later when I went to go see Saving Private Ryan, and everything clicked. The topography of the landscape, how everything looked. I realized I was in Normandy,
Wow.
and not on the beach, but it was, because once the invasion on the beach, then they moved inland and were fighting completely inland, going through France, through
Mhm.
Normandy, and the topography of where they shot the movie. They shot it just right across the channel in England rather than France, but it's all the same type of countryside. And but that's what I recognized from
That's
my
pretty
dream, and
powerful.
I realized I died in Normandy.
My goodness, how old were you when you started really getting into these visions, information?
I had things kind of hit me sporadically through my lifetime, and most of the time I would ignore it or not really understand it.
Mhm.
And it took me many years later. Like I said, I had the dream and then didn't understand it for years, until I went and saw the movie and made the connection.
Wow.
Um, Sometimes I'll have dreams and not understand what the dreams are about, and then later it'll hit me. Here's one. I had a dream about 9/11 2 days before it happened.
Wow.
Um, but the dream was symbolic, and I didn't understand it. I had this dream. It was on Sunday, and 9/11 was on Tuesday. I dreamed that I was standing on a riverbank, but it wasn't like in a city. It actually was very desert like, with like red sand, very barren, almost like a wasteland. And there was this adobe building behind me and this big river, and I couldn't see across the river, but I knew New York City was over there. I didn't understand that part of the imagery. All of a sudden, two nuclear explosions went off side by side, and the mushroom clouds raised up. But what I thought was odd was the stalks on the mushroom clouds were really tall and thin. See
Mhm.
what I'm getting at?
Right.
And then in the dream, I'm like with people, we're panicking, we're trying to get out of there. And then all of a sudden, there is a third nuclear explosion far to the south.
My goodness.
And that's when I woke up.
Yeah, I'd say you're pretty switched on with psychic ability.
Well, I didn't understand it. And even when 9/11 hit, I didn't understand it until later that night. After I was home and watching the TV and everything, I had completely forgotten about the dream. And then all of a sudden, boom, it hit me out of the blue. And I'm like, OMG.
Wow.
I had dreamed that 2 days before.
That's interesting. I had I didn't get any premonitions, but I remember the morning of that. I was in the field surveying with my husband at the time, and we both picked up on that there was something really negative in the atmosphere. We were both saying, and I kept telling him, because I'm really sensitive to energy too. I kept saying, where's this hate coming from? Because it just felt like static heat, energy, negativity. It felt really hostile. And we were only in the field for a little while, and then I had to go to the doctors. But when I went to the doctors, on my way over there, I heard something, and it wasn't like I heard, you have your inner voice. This isn't like artificial telepathy. It was more of a get off the road, look up, get off the road, it kept telling me, and I couldn't figure that out. So I went to the doctors, and I just got over there, and I said, I don't know what's going on. I called my husband, and he said, didn't you watch the news? And that's when they had hit the tower. So once again, my radar was telling me something, It's just that it wasn't the way you had it. So, yeah, it's interesting how we should pay attention to these things because it's more like situation awareness, but also our internal radar is telling us something. It's cueing us to something in our environment.
It's one of those things where when you start to think about precognition, um, it, I really believe a lot of precognition happens because of the timeline. We live in a linear timeline, but that linear time is an illusion. And physics is starting to prove this, that all time is really happening at once. There is no time, basically.
Right.
It's our perception of the clock hand moving or the earth turning, and things that are happening that tells us, okay, time is passing. But really, everything is happening at once. So if everything is happening at once, and it's only our perception of it that's linear, then it starts to make more sense that maybe what people having these precognitions is that they realize they're approaching a spot on the timeline where this has happened, even though everything is happening at once.
Right. Yeah. It reminds me of it's a frequency band. And it seems to me, it reminds me of a record player in the old days. We have the record players and the different little grooves in the record player. Everything is a frequency. So it matters of to what degree you're resonating and what frequency you're on. And to me, it's like you're almost accessing a radio band where you can access information and data streams. That's the way I look at it because you're right. Time's just a benchmark of measure. So I don't know why people put so much emphasis on time, but I believe it's a trap and it's a distortion. And people should be very careful when they're working around time.
Yeah, that's why I kind of like the American Indian perspective. They call it Indian time. People they're not as many of the tribes are not as bound to the white man time as we are. We're not caring about watches, not caring about, oh, I got to do this in 5 minutes, I got to do this, or this is due at this time. I believe that people when they were living more primitively had it so much better off, that didn't have the stress that we had. Yeah, there were survival things that they had to put up with, not only with finding food, tending for their families, but you know what? It was a different lifestyle completely, and time didn't matter as much, except for maybe when you had to measure the seasons, know when the animals are migrating, know when to move to a winter camp, and follow the seasons. But you weren't like being held down to, okay, this minute you have 5 minutes to get this done or turn in this report, or you have this deadline. You didn't have all that stress.
No, it's like PTSD.
Yeah. And which I think is what a part of what causes so many of the diseases we have.
Right.
Disease,
it's unnatural, Mark. It's an unnatural lifestyle.
Yeah. No, it's not.
Yeah, it's really wild. Go ahead.
No, it's not. It's not natural. And I really think that there are better ways we could be living in humanity. I mean, even if you look at, and again, I'll point to the ET phenomenon, UFOlogy, where so many of these primitive cultures, we look at them as being primitive cultures. I don't consider them being primitive. I consider them being more spiritually advanced, even if they're living a more physically primitive existence. And yet these are a lot of the people that these intelligences choose to visit. There's these two great books. This author, Ardo Starkiller, I believe her name is. She wrote two books about Native American.
Oh, RD6 Killer.
RD6 Killer, thank you.
I've interviewed her. She's great. Yep.
Oh yes, I'm reading her second book right now.
Cool.
And the story she tells about the Native American peoples, both on the reservation, off the reservation, having these experiences with these extraterrestrials, or whoever these beings are, and they're more willing, it seems like, to interact with these types of cultures rather than coming in and dealing with our white culture, which is like all FUBAR.
Oh yeah, that's all about selfies. Yeah, really? I mean, what are they going to be able to interface with? I mean, there's nothing there. I know I should be so. I'm not judging. I'm just observing, truly. But that's really what it is, isn't it? I mean, it's kind of like, yeah. I don't think they would appreciate it too. You don't throw pearls to swine.
You mean like the Kardashians? Oh,
yeah, exactly.
No, anyway.
They're too busy taking pictures of their butts. Yeah. So, well, getting started. But go ahead. I digress. But yeah, it's a great book, and Artie's wonderful. I just love her. Yeah. But it's true.
I would love to interview her sometime because again, there's so many things that are really going on around us in the world that we turn, and I say we by society turns a blind eye to. And now the paranormal in general is much more popular these days thanks to the last 10 years of paranormal shows, starting with Ghost Hunters, gag me, and most of these other horrible paranormal shows. But yet they've still brought more of an awareness of the paranormal and the strangeness of the world to the public eye. Now, granted, most of these shows are terrible, or they're overly produced, scripted, and you know, people in some of these shows can complain, say all they want. No, it's not scripted. Yeah, you're scripted, and I should know. I've been on a couple of these shows.
Which ones? Really? Which one were you on?
I did an episode of Paranormal State with criminal Ryan Buell. I don't want to laugh at him. I mean, the man obviously is having some problems. Stole another car, I guess, again, the other day, I guess. But I was more angry with the producers of the show because of how they screwed over our clients. See, what these television shows do is they reach out to paranormal groups looking for cases. Then they get the cases and they come in and all they care about is shooting a television show. They're not there to help. They're not there to help solve their problems. And what they wind up doing is making things 10 times worse. Right. The client said, please don't say my last name on the air. They said her last name on the air. And the town she lived in. So she had looky-loos driving by her house for months. Right. They had another client. It was supposed to be a double episode where there were two houses across the street from each other, both experiencing activity because the activity was in the land, not in a particular house. And they wound up filming for 3 days in this lady's house, using her bathroom. She cooked for them sometimes, for the crew, and they cut her completely out of the episode. You want to know why? She wasn't frightened enough.
Oh, for crying out loud. Really? It's all about sensationalism, isn't it?
Yep. The other lady was scared to death of what she was doing, but the lady that they cut out, she was more curious and inquisitive. She really wanted to know. Well, they didn't like that. That doesn't make for terrifying television. So they completely cut her out of the episode. She felt used and abused. I saw some shenanigans where they aired things out of order to make it look like they made discoveries, or their psychic Michelle Boulanger.
Oh, really? Her? Yeah. The demonologist. Okay.
Oh, don't get me started.
Oh, really, yeah. Mark?
They came in with one of the things they were interested is my client when the house was built in the 1920s that they supposedly found Indian remains on the property. So for the television show, they brought in a ground penetrating radar team, and they scanned the whole backyard, and they actually found some very interesting things buried in the backyard. There were a couple of spots, and I still have the radar photos, a couple of spots they called areas of interest, which was basically they thought were still burials. But also in the middle of it, there was this huge 50-foot diameter circle buried under the ground.
Wow.
With perfectly circular. And then on one end of it, it looked like a point, almost like an arrow, and at the other end of it was a fan like an arrow feather, like there was an arrow going through this circle. And it was pointing towards the north. It was pointing north.
Wow, how interesting.
Now, the client wouldn't allow us to go in and excavate. It freaked her out too much, and she didn't want to disturb anything, so we never really did know if there was anything under there. But then what they did was the next night they brought in their psychic and had her stand in the backyard. They filmed her from the waist up. Mind you, here's all these flags, little flags that they put all over the yard where the ground penetrating radar was. And she's standing there going, oh yeah, I think something's buried here.
Oh, get out. Oh my God.
Well, you know what they did? They filmed that. Then they played that first. What? Then it made it seem like she had this revelation. And so then they brought in the radar team to scan and they found this stuff.
Oh man, I hate that. That's not okay. She's a fraud. Get out of here, lady. I shouldn't
It,
say fraud, but seriously,
it's the production
don't make
company.
it easy for them. Oh, yeah, truly. Yeah.
And I have a television and film production background. I got my bachelor's degree in filmmaking, so I understand the industry. And when I saw some of this stuff, and then I heard a lot of it about it later, like a cast member snorting coke in my client's bathroom. I won't say which one it was. But and there was another and I also did there was a couple of other times when like Sci-Fi Channel contacted me looking for shows like Haunted Collector. Okay, I know John Zaffis, I know Brian Cano. Brian's from Jersey. I was in Jersey at the time, and they looked for a case, and I had a great this old restaurant that was in a colonial house that goes back to the 1700s. Very haunted location. We investigated a few times, and so I gave him that case, and John and his team and Brian, they went there to do the show and do the investigation. They wanted to interview me because I've investigated the place and had experiences. Well, it turns out Sci-Fi Channel, which is what I'm warning everybody, don't ever work for the Sci-Fi Channel. They will screw you over. They have a standing order that they are not allowed to feature any other paranormal investigators other than the ones on their shows. So if you're not on their team, you don't exist. And some pinhead producer at Sci-Fi said, "Oh, he's an investigator? Absolutely not. We can't have him on TV."
Oh, brother.
And so here's their whole ideology is, okay, yeah, can you give us cases? Okay, great. You gave us one. Okay, good. Now get the hell out. They take
parasites. Let them get their own cases then. That's the way it's going to roll.
Well, that's why I don't help them anymore.
Good for you.
I also did an episode of Haunted Highways. Got interviewed by Jack Osborne. Great guy. I like Jack a lot. But halfway through my interview, some pinhead producer came in, interrupted us, and told me to change my story.
What? Why?
Again, I was saying I was with my team investigating this location. And no, they can't have that. No, don't say you're with your team. Just say you were there with some friends. And things happened. And I said, absolutely not. And they cut me out of the episode because I wouldn't change my story.
Well, good for you, Mark. You have integrity, something they don't have. I don't like that, though. I mean, yeah, I was supposed to get on a few. I'm not going to mention like the History Channel, some other things. Some things fall through, but it has a lot to do with the fact that I don't think they do have integrity. I think that's the problem. And then when you come out with the truth, I don't want censorship. That's why I have my own documentary out. If you want something done right, and you probably know this, you do it yourself. Otherwise, people are going to misrepresent you.
Exactly. People, and that's the problem. And we actually did a rant show on this last week. That
we need to call in on your rant show.
We need to have you on. I know you'd have a great time ranting.
Oh yes, of course I would. Oh yes.
The problem with the paranormal community is because of all these shows, all these paranormal teams formed, but they formed with the idea of getting famous and getting on TV and getting their own shows. That's all they care about. And they don't care about actually helping somebody. They're either in it for the thrill. They're thrill seekers looking to experience the paranormal firsthand and get scared or, whatever. Or they're looking to get on a television show and try to get their 15 minutes of fame. And there's very few people out there trying to help people who have these problems. Even these television shows, you see TAPS go in and go, "Oh, we have this family and we got to go in. We got to help them." Yeah, what do? They go in, they film, and they go, "Okay, here's what we got. Bye." And they leave.
Yeah,
they haven't helped
anybody. They stir
it
up. They stir everything up energetically and split.
Yeah, they move on to the next case. And I know people who had TAPS come in and investigate, and then they still having problems, and they try to reach out for TAPS, and TAPS won't even get back to them. They're too busy going off doing their next episodes.
Sure, they're making a lot of money. That's the thing too. Yeah, they don't care.
And you know what? Again, I'm not bashing. I know people in TAPS. Okay, I'm friends with some of them, and I don't blame them so much as I blame these production companies. They're soulless. Right. They're the epitome of what's wrong with this country and what's going wrong with the world. Everything that we talked about in the first hour. Right. It's all about money. It's all about ratings. It's all about marketing.
And sensationalism.
And fear sells. They want fear. Notice everything now here in America, everything's demons.
Yeah.
Everybody's got a demon. I started getting all these cases when I was in New Jersey, which kind of got me out of the paranormal for a while because I got fed up with these people calling me up, convinced they had demonic activity in their house, and not only was it not demonic, there wasn't anything there. They've watched one too many of these damn shows, and if they hear the door creaking or the hot water heater coming on or whatnot, they were convinced it was paranormal activity, and they were convinced it was evil. But it's part of it is because they're being brainwashed into believing that everything is evil and negative.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, very, very true. You manifest at will your own reality, and if it's not a good manifestation through thought, yeah, I can only imagine. Input, output, once again.
Here I can segue into let's segue into cryptozoology. Let's talk about Bigfoot. Okay.
Oh yeah.
When I was a kid, I first started learning about Bigfoot. I went up to Oregon and got some books, John Green's a couple of first books, and got into Bigfoot and was really fascinated. And everything that I had ever read for years had it that it was a peaceful creature, just wanted to be left alone, never harmed anybody. But you want to see what we have out there now? Look at the shows Mountain Monsters. Okay, which is hate to admit is my guilty pleasure. I love that show for the entertainment factor. Uh-huh. But every time these guys go into a place, it's because somebody's being terrorized by these aggressive Bigfoots that are out to hurt somebody or kill somebody. They make them evil. They make them fearful, and they got to go in. We're going to go in and get those sons of bitches. You have the new show Killing Bigfoot.
Right, I heard about that.
Yeah, don't watch it. You've heard about it.
No, I don't watch TV anyway.
Yeah.
But go ahead. Yeah.
I watched 20 minutes of one episode and I just shook my head. It's so awful. But their whole premise is, they got to kill a Bigfoot to prove it exists. It's like
subhuman activity. I can't get over this. What is going on with people?
That is the mentality of the entertainment, which is again, it's brainwashing people to believe that everything out there is negative. Look at the alien thing that we had. Back in the 1950s, we had the alien movies, the sci-fi movies, Earth versus the Flying Saucers, and aliens were evil, but that was a direct a correlation with the Cold War. A lot of that was allegories of the Cold War and the Russians, and they were using aliens as that fear. And then it started to turn into especially in the 70s, when Spielberg's early movies, we had Close Encounters, which was a wonderful, still one of my favorite movies of all time.
Yeah, very well done.
And showing a very positive experience with ETs. Then E.T. the Extraterrestrial came out. And there was this time when people were looking at the ETs as space brothers or people could help us, and it was very positive. And then suddenly everything gets turned on its head. We get Independence Day. And then from that point forward, how many alien invasion movies have you seen? Everything is negative. Aliens coming to take over the earth, and us egotistical earthlings getting in our little contraptions, going up and kicking their asses. Or fighting them, in the streets, like Invasion LA or whatever that movie was. But even Spielberg bought into it. Spielberg, who produced Close Encounters and E.T., very positive. What did he do? Freaking War of the Worlds and Evil ETs. Then he does the television series on TNT, Dark Skies, about negative alien invasion and human resistance. Even Spielberg fell into it.
Well, Spielberg, he went downhill. He's just got so contorted. I think he originally was a very, very talented person, and somehow, some way, he just becomes something of a monstrosity.
I think
he got corrupted by the whole thing.
He's been corrupted.
Yeah, that's too bad.
Can you name a memorable Spielberg movie that's been made in the last 10 years?
Not recently, no.
I think the last one he made that was truly memorable was Jurassic Park.
Oh, I like Jurassic Park. The original, not the other ones.
Yeah, I know. The first one. One. And that was about it. And since then, try to name a Spielberg movie. It used to be able to count every Spielberg movie. Used to be able to look forward to them coming out. Now they're like nothing. You don't even know that they're him.
Well, and also they keep recreating old classic movies, and that's another thing. They don't have any insight or new creativity. They have to replicate something else, a dim version of something prior,
because they're lazy.
Yep.
They're trying to market on a former name. They'll do remakes, or television shows into movies or all this stuff because there is no originality anymore. And
Right.
the originality is being killed. There's lots of people out there coming up with great original ideas. But you know what? All these greedy pinhead producers think about is money, money, money. So what's going to make money? Oh, yeah, let's remake this movie. People remember that movie. Then they'll want to come and see it because of the familiarity of it. Or then we'll make, Fast and the Furious 23, and let's crash some more cars and people will come spend their money on it. And there's nothing original. If you want to see original movies, and again, I'm coming from the film background that I come from, you have to look at some of the independent filmmakers. You have to look at the independent stuff, not the major studio stuff, because it's crap.
Absolutely.
It sickens me when I hear of every movie coming out this year is a sequel or a franchise movie or another damn superhero movie.
Oh, and they're all contorted. I mean, they're not even good superhero movies anymore. It's just gone downhill. It's distorted, twisted, and mangled.
Yeah. But that's the reflection of our society. It's a reflection on where we are. Everything is mediocrity. I'm a Tom Petty fan. I like Tom Petty. And he did an album a few years ago called The Last DJ. And the whole album was dedicated to songs pretty much ripping the recording industry a new one on how they celebrate mediocrity and dumb everything down, and there's no real music or artistry anymore. And I think that's true of everything, the film industry, the music industry, television industry.
Absolutely. Yeah, music isn't even music anymore. We grew up with really good music, but now I don't recognize it. It's crap. I mean, honestly, the lyrics are illiterate. All it is promoting sex, and to me, they're just a bunch of pole dancers. Half the chicks out there, they could be in a Vegas act. I mean, is that music? I thought that was just more like sex on film. So yeah, it's really strange, Mark. And I mean, yeah, it bothers me. Yeah.
It's again, where are we at this age? Where are we at this point in our history? There's a part of me that thinks that we're Rome 2.0.
Yeah.
And just like Rome, we're going to crash. We can't keep going this way. Something is going to give. Whether it's the Earth does something to us, kicks us off, the climate change. For me, people who claim that, humans don't affect the climate on this planet, that's the biggest bunch of horse pucky I've ever heard in my life. Of course we do. With the amount of CO2, carbon monoxide we pump in the air from plants, and everything we pump into the water, the sewage, and let alone look what's happening with Fukushima that nobody is talking about. Mainstream media doesn't even put it as a blip on the radar, and that is an extinction level event. The amount of radiation, the thing's melted into the earth. It's going into the groundwater. Japan should almost be evacuated. But you know what? Nobody's saying a word about it. I won't touch Pacific Ocean fish. I won't, because
you need a Geiger counter. That's for darn sure. They're not even checking. Last I checked, even in Alaska, for radiation. So that's concerning. Yeah.
And it's been what, 6 years now?
Yeah.
How long has Fukushima been?
A while.
And they still and it's worse. They don't have it under control. And that you should think that should be. Everybody thinks Chernobyl. They know how bad Chernobyl was. Fukushima is a million times worse. And yet the media, of course, won't focus on that. You know what they'll focus on? They'll come up with something new. Oh, Trump had eggs for breakfast, so he hates chickens.
It's ridiculous. So anything he does, they're going to bash. Yeah.
Or they'll some movie star is divorcing another movie star, or hey, let's put the Kardashians up yet again. It's the stupidest things. Distractions. Everything's a distraction. Smoking.
What it is, it's like a mobile. Look here, kids. Look here. Don't look over there. And it makes me wonder if they do know what's going on and that they're just kind of living life like it's their last breath. Like they don't care, partying like it's the end of the world, so to speak.
I think that's exactly it. There's such a fatalist attitude. These kids now, they're living for the moment. Nobody's thinking about growing old or having a future. A lot of these kids don't think they're going to have a future.
Now, what I'm seeing more and more is, which is really concerning, is animal abuse is on the rise with children, and their just behavior is wicked. I mean, just evil kids, like the bad seed a billionfold, you know. So something's wrong there. Now, whether it's the parents that raise them or media or whatever it is, something's got to give there too.
Well, the parents are not allowed to discipline their kids, you know.
Back in the old days, man, you know, remember the paddles, right?
Oh, I got my ass beat when I misbehaved, you know, and my mom had a big wooden yardstick that she used to pull out and smack me with when I misbehaved. And you know what? Nowadays, if she were to do that to me when I was a kid, you know, DIFUS would come away and take us away.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Oh yeah, yeah. They'd probably say it was abuse. Well, you said you came up with a military family too, and I grew up in a military kind of family too. So yeah, I understand that protocol. You know, you don't act up. That's it. You know. So I mean, we couldn't misbehave when we were growing up at all. I mean, at all. So.
Well, I was
I don't know if you had a more relaxed environment or not. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, it was more relaxed. I mean, my dad he was in World War II and stuff, so he wasn't really hardcore military, so we didn't really have that. But you know, again, that was the product of back coming in the 60s and 70s. You know, you misbehaved, you got smacked, and you learned real quick you didn't want to get smacked, so you learned how to behave.
Right.
And so many, you know, it's how they've taken that away, and now the state is dictating to people how they can parent. And then the kids who grew up in the 80s through all that conditioning that I mentioned earlier, and the political correctness, they're trying to raise kids, and they're failing miserably because they're not doing it right. They're doing it the way that they've been taught by the media, by the state, and now we have these entitlement generation, these millennials that are worthless as you know what on a bull.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, well, they're not role models to their children, that's for darn sure.
And you know, then you have somebody like Mike Rowe. He does all those television shows, voiceovers, and Dirty Jobs. I think is, you know, he's a cool, interesting guy. And the one thing he's been talking about is, look, we push kids to go to college, get a degree, and go out and get that corporate job. And they're looked down on as if you don't do that, you're nobody. And yet nobody is pushing their kids. There's no shop classes in school anymore. There's nothing to encourage kids. You don't have to go to college if you don't want to. There are so many trades out there that they're looking for people who can work with their hands. I mean, let's say society falls apart. How is somebody trained in marketing going to help? Okay. But if you got a guy who's trained as an engineer or a field service technician or an architect, or some guys who work with their hands to build stuff and create stuff, those are the kind of jobs we really need in this country. We don't need any more pinhead corporate executives.
Oh, I agree.
You know,
yeah.
And you know, that used to be what this country's focus was back in the 40s and 50s and going into the 60s. You go out and you work and provide for your family, and you're working a good, solid job. And hey, you even had job stability back then. You know, now there's no such thing as job stability. You know, I've changed jobs about 15, 20 times in my lifetime because there's no job stability. You know, you don't go work for a company for 30, 40 years and retire. It doesn't happen anymore.
No, it doesn't. Not at all. That's why I say if you can be an entrepreneur and work for yourself, that's the best idea. But you're right. Learning a trade, learning your own craft, it's huge. It's a really big deal because most of the time the colleges, it's all just a piece of paper anyways. And most of the time they don't even teach people the right information. It's all censored, edited data of what they want to spoon feed somebody. So they get out there with their PhDs or whatever masters they think they get, and they think they're smart. And then they realize that they're not because they've been fed incorrect data. But into that little group of people saying, oh, you know, it's that little group, that little clique of people that wants to promote each other. But once again, where's the jobs for that? Yeah, it's just kind of a mess. It's backwards. It doesn't really work.
Yeah, I'm going to take my liberal arts degree and put it on the wall and look at it because that's about all it's good for.
Yeah, making a pretty frame for it. You know, you can say, hey, I've got this. You know, that's the whole idea is just basically just letting people know what you have, writing your little resume and putting a piece of paper on there. You know, what's really interesting, I'm sure you saw Gattaca, right? Remember the movie Gattaca?
Yes.
Well, how your resume is in your DNA. I think that's I think that's the future. I think somewhere, if we ever make it out of this wormhole, which I don't know, but it's going to be that Gattaca.
You know what? I'm a corporate recruiter by day. So I work for hiring people for companies. And the one thing I've noticed in my industry is that they lean towards making that they want people having degrees. And yet you'll get somebody who has 30 years of experience and he can't get the job because they require a bachelor's degree. But yet the guy's got 30 years of experience. You're absolutely right. It's not right. But that's the mentality that they're pushing people towards.
Well, you know what I'd say? And I know this sounds tacky. Make yourself a nice PhD paper certification and say, here it is.
Yeah, unfortunately, with the background checks, they look for that stuff.
Oh, you know what? I look at half the people nowadays, though. I swear to God, I don't believe half the crap they put on their resume. You probably have seen it, too. I swear to God, I don't. So
No, it's.
I have a PhD in covert technology. How can I put that out there, right? Just by my own experience in artificial intelligence. Oh, where am I supposed to get my job? I can't get it anywhere, So once again, they don't teach that we're in regular earthbound schools.
Yeah, I'd say go flip burgers at McDonald's, but now they're replacing people with robots. So
it's not even a burger anyway, so it's Soylent Green. So stay away from there. Right? We don't know what it is. What is it? Oh God!
It's not food.
No, it's not.
Again, it's something else in our society. We're conditioned to think that that's actually food. That's not.
I think the best thing about McDonald's in the old days were their French fries, and that was when I was very, very young as a kid. But I don't go near places like that. I don't go at fast food. Actually, I don't even trust chefs. So I'm very weird like that. So you're probably more trusting than I am.
Yeah, I'll still wind up eating it sometimes, even though
if somebody spits in it. I need to get it checked under a microscope before I get my food. And
you're better off making your own.
I do. I don't go out. I don't eat out very rarely, unless I know the chef or I know the people. Yeah, but that's just me.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so nice having you on to the show tonight, Mark. It's
well, thank you.
Enjoyable. Yeah, I hope to have you back too. Let everybody know also about all your shows in the station one more time so we can kind of promote that. We have about 15 minutes plus or minus left here, but I want to make sure that everybody gets a rundown. And if they want to reach out to you, what's the best way to do that?
They can reach out to me through, oh, good Lord, I have several ways to get a hold of us. We're on Facebook, of course, and we have our Facebook pages for Paranormal UK Radio Network, Supernatural Analysis Research Institute, Glannant Ty Publishing, and Glannant Ty, TY, and so and our websites as well. So you can find us on any of those: glannantty.com, paranormalukradio.network.com, and sarinstitute.com.
Excellent. Very, very good. And are you still doing investigations here locally? I know you've moved. So are you doing local investigations with paranormal supernatural here?
Yes, I am. I'm trying to get myself established here. As I mentioned, I was in New Jersey for 17 years. I ran a group out there for 10 years. Now I'm out here in Colorado Springs, and we did one investigation at Cave of the Winds in Manitou Springs.
I love that place.
We got into the caverns, and that was an interesting investigation. We had a lot happen. In fact, it surprised me in how much happened because there's no recorded deaths in these caves. And yet there's something really intense going on. And I'm of the opinion that it's not ghosts. I think we're dealing with other types of beings or entities.
Interesting.
Not sure what they are yet, but I think it falls in line with, a lot of the miners talk about like Tommyknockers or these entities in the caves. And we had also at Glannant Ty, do you know who Barry Fitzgerald is from Ghost Hunters International?
Right.
We published one of Barry's books called In the Mist of Gods. And his research these days is looking into the Celtic Shay or fairy lore. And the ideas of not the fairies like Disney makes you think they are, little cute Tinkerbells floating around, pixie ducks. No, these are the darker Irish, Celtic, and even not just Ireland and all of the UK and Europe, these creatures, these intelligent beings that we share the planet with, that have aspects that seem paranormal. They know how to appear and disappear at will.
Mhm.
There are things living under the ground. There are things I refer to as ultra-terrestrial, in
Right.
that there's a correlation between, in the UK, in Ireland, they're called the Fae, or the fairies. Then you have Cornish pixies, you have gnomes. In the Middle East, you have the jinn. In Iceland, you have the Icelandic elves. North America, the Native American people talk about the little people. And every culture around the world has these legends, this folklore of these other worldly creatures. And we dismiss it as just being folklore. But yet there seems to be some evidence that there's something going on. And how many of these stories talk about these beings living underground?
Mhm.
In Iceland, they move whole highways around a mound that supposedly where these elves live. At least they respect them there. They don't mow down the hill. They move
Mhm.
around it. In fact,
Yeah.
so many movies are filmed in Iceland now, and when they film a movie, they have to put out offerings to appease the elves so that they have a smooth shoot. Otherwise, they'll have camera problems and things go missing, and they'll have all sorts of mischief. So, they take it seriously.
Mhm.
And I think there are different types of beings that are underground. There's this video came out around Christmas time. I don't know if you saw it. There's this guy. He has a website called Exploring Abandoned Mines, and he's a spelunker. He's not a paranormal guy. He's a spelunker. He goes out to all these old abandoned mines, and he goes in them and explores them.
Mhm.
And he went into this one mine in California, and he was testing a new flashlight, and he went deep into this mine. And if you watch any of his videos, that's just all he does. He goes into these mines and explore. Well, he gets way back in this one mine, and all of a sudden he starts hearing voices. There's nobody there. He's by himself. And it sounds like three people having an intense whispered conversation, but there's
Mm.
a guttural quality to it, and you can't make out what they're saying. Well, he starts to freak out a little bit, and then he starts to leave, and at one point he stops, and then it happens again. This time it's twice as loud. It's like there's somebody right there with him, and yet he's
Mm.
videotaping this, and there's nobody there. And he finally said, "Okay, I had enough of this," and he gets out. Uh,
Interesting.
another mine he went into, he just started getting a really bad vibe from it, and
Mhm.
he felt like he was being watched. And he's shining his light down, and down in the back of the mine they have these chains hanging down, and all of a sudden there's this one chain swinging wildly,
Wow.
like something warning him to stay out.
Very
Now,
interesting.
people would think, oh, well, that's a ghost. Well, that's jumping to a conclusion. You have no idea what it is.
Mhm.
Um, but there seems to be some evidence pointing to other types of beings that maybe have a paranormal aspect to them. When I was in Cave of the Winds, I caught these strange lights under rocks that
Mm.
were glowing really bright. I didn't see them at the time. I caught them later in video. We got
Mm.
EVPs of, again, nobody died in the cave anybody's aware of,
Mhm.
and yet we got EVPs. We heard disembodied voices.
Yeah.
Um, and a couple times they were harsh, like a growling, and one voice said to get out. They didn't
Mm.
want us there.
Very
So
interesting.
it's a fascinating aspect
Mhm.
of the paranormal that I'm really interested in these days, and I'm really wanting to try to learn more about it.
Well, I think you're awesome at what you do, and I always incorporate the science aspect of it because I think there is a lot of mock radio communication that goes on. We have a very noisy planet, a lot of transmissions and signals with different frequencies, and I'm familiar with artificial telepathy and mock radio communications, which means there's all sorts of data, transferring around with conversation, which might appear as a ghost or a spirit, or might be picked up by an EVP, but you might be capturing something that's a covert intelligence program too. So you have to be careful of that, but you would know by the dialogue and the way they're communicating.
Well,
But
some of it, I've worked with engineers on my team, and the one thing they've told me is like these digital recorders will not pick up radio signals. and I trust what the engineers are telling me. But there are devices, and I have one, and I don't like it. It's called the SB7 Spirit Box. And so many of the shows use this thing where what it does is it scans radio frequencies at a high rate, and then you're supposed to the white noise, the ghosts are supposed to come out and be able to use that to talk. The problem with that device is it's scanning regular radio waves. Yeah. So if you're in anywhere that's getting a radio signal from a radio station, you're going to get it. And if you hear a voice come up, oh, look, see, I got a voice. No, you probably got KGLA down in San Diego.
Right.
It's that when we were in the cave, though, in the caverns, I did bring it because we were deep underground, under 250 feet of solid limestone.
Right.
So I thought that would be a perfect environment to test this device, because theoretically there should be no radio contamination down there. And in the back of the caves where we were, there was no electricity, no electrical cables, no nothing, and it's under solid rock. You should not be getting any radio signals. And yet, when we did the experiment, not only did we get a brief voice at one point, we kept hearing this faint music that almost sounded like an old style, like turn of the century, late 1800s type of music, band music. But it was faint coming in through the static, but we did hear it, and we caught it on our devices. So now, can I actually sit there and say, yeah, we caught disembodied music, it's paranormal? No. It's strange. And I don't know enough about radio frequencies to be able to rule out 100% that we should not be getting any radio frequencies that deep underground.
I still think you can. But that's just me. I think it can permeate pretty darn far, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah.
Which is why you can't use that device as proof of anything. And too many. I go into investigations these days. I still like using my cameras, my night vision cameras,
nice.
EVP, digital audio recorders. I do have a thermal camera. I do like using that for measuring heat and seeing. And I am in the process of trying to build my own Kinect system SLS camera that that maps the skeleton frame. They use on ghost detectors all the time.
Huh?
Yeah, I'm trying to put one of those together. Now, at the same time, this technology is fine, and yet I hate relying solely on it. I like to sometimes set them up, put them aside, and then I walk in and I use my own senses. Because your body, the human body, is very adept at picking up these energies and knowing when something is there. And if you're spending all your time with your face in a camera or with electronic devices, you're concentrating on the devices and not the environment. And when you go into an environment, feel what is there. And I've picked up things in my intuition. I've picked up where if I think there's somebody standing there, and I even get a mental impression of them in my mind. One time I was even at home, and all of a sudden I just felt like something was staring at me, and I looked across the room. There's nothing there. Yet in my mind, there's this guy with a shaved head, wearing overalls, brown overalls, standing there and staring at me.
Wow.
He's transient, just walking through.
Very interesting.
But yet I still saw that in my mind's eye. And you have to start to learn to trust your body to give you those signals to pick up on things, and it's just as good. The camera equipment is great for catching stuff to review it later, but in the moment, your body tells you everything you need to know.
Very, very true. Have you done any research or investigation at the Stanley Hotel yet?
Not yet. I heard the Stanley Hotel really isn't doing that anymore. They changed their policy. So I visited there at Thanksgiving. I would love to get in there, but yeah, they've changed their policy like so many of these places are these days. They're trying to get away from the paranormal.
Right.
They don't want to be known strictly for that.
Well, I've been up there, and we were just wandering through the halls. We weren't on a tour, but I can tell you the energetic signature, it's got some heavy, heavy stuff going on over there. There's no doubt about it. Yep.
There's so many places around the world that are on my bucket list. What I'm really interested in right now are these locations of high strangeness. Places that that have a combination of really strange activity from paranormal to UFO to cryptozoology, places like the Skinwalker Ranch. Now, of course, you can't get on the Skinwalker Ranch, but there are other places around the world, the Hayu-Baciu Forest in Romania, that circle out there. There's some intense energy going on there. I also know John Edmonds. I don't know if you've ever had him on your show.
Oh, I hope to, yeah.
Yeah, great guy. Get him on your show. His story is fascinating. What he's dealing with in his ranch outside of Phoenix at the Stardust Ranch is on par with what they experienced at the Skinwalker Ranch, with the very negative ET experiences, which I'm not convinced it's ET. I'm thinking it might be something more terrestrial, even though they look like the quote unquote grays. But I also think these things can shapeshift too.
Correct. I was just about to say that. Yeah, I believe a lot of that has to do with how they choose to appear.
Right.
No doubt. But he says he has some other. He said he had aliens in his freezer. I don't know if he still does.
Well, he claimed that he's killed a few of them. He had it with a samurai sword that he has, and he says that if you don't take the head, the body disintegrates and disappears. Now he claims that he's had a body that he has stashed away hidden somewhere, and they've sent out tissue samples for testing, and they've come back as non-human. They can't identify it.
That's interesting.
And he continues to have intense activity at his range. He's been trying to sell it to get away from it.
Right, and we're out of time here, Mark. My goodness, it's been a pleasure to have you on, John. I mean, Mark, not John. Mark, it's wonderful to have you on, and I want to make sure we have you back at some point in the continuum. So thanks for joining us tonight.
I'd love to come back. Thank you for having me.
Excellent, my pleasure, and thank you everybody for tuning in, and thanks everybody in the chat room. And also, please stay tuned for Shine Side Out with David, Dundra, and Mickey coming up next to sell you on to the night from Down Under with their wonderful show. And their topic tonight is ontology, the philosophical study of the nature of being, becoming, existence, or reality, as well as the basic categories of being and their relation. So that should be very, very excellent. Everybody have a great week. See you next time.